Hey everyone, it's Rye, bringing you a new type of video. In this video, we're going to be discussing specific civs. So, obviously, that you can see by the title of the video, I'm going to be mostly focusing on civs that I think are more difficult to play or less intuitive, or frankly, that I've seen a lot of newer players, new to mid-level players, just mess up. And in this video, I'm going to be covering Sioux specifically, but this is going to be more of an ongoing series where if you want me to talk about a specific civ, some you could be only a little bit of talking, some can be more in depth. This one is definitely going to be more in depth because Sioux has a lot to talk about, but the point still stands. If you guys want to see a specific civ, feel free to leave a comment. I see all your comments, and I'll try to get to it. But without further ado, here is the civ discussion for Sioux. So, Sioux is probably one of the best civs in the game that never gets banned. For whatever reason, this civ kind of just flies under the radar, but it was picked pretty much every single time it's in a draft. If we look at performance from previous tournaments, Sioux was quite literally the most played civ. You have tourney 1 or tourney 2 on the top left. Underneath that, you have tourney 3. In tourney 2, Civ had 12 total games, 3 of which it won. Its average placement was 3.25, which is ridiculous given how many different people played it and how many games it played. Sioux was in about a quarter of all the games, right? That is not by coincidence. It was never banned, but it was picked almost every single time it was offered. In the third tournament, Sioux's popularity picked up more, and because of that, it caught a few bans. Still was very, very popular within the top 5 most commonly played civs, and had a disgusting 60% win rate with an average ranking of 2.6. That is monstrous. Now, what makes Sioux so good, and what can kind of lead people astray? So there's 2 main points. The first point you have is the plane bonus. Now, planes, as everyone pretty much knows, is probably one of the best starts you can have. It allows for potential growth, depending if you get river tiles, but more importantly than that, it makes every single one of your tiles have a hammer. Civ 5 ultimately is about a race towards hammers, a race towards food, and a race towards growth. If you're only grassland, you don't have the agency to decide if you want to grow or to work production. With Sioux or with Plains, you kind of get a mix of both worlds, and Sioux gets Plains bias, which is insane. So let's start there. When you spawn in, you have a bias that your start's probably going to be pretty good. Additionally, let's combine the Plains bonus with the ability to have Himeji in Plains. What's important is, unlike Himeji, this is for everything. This is for in your opponent's territory. Your opponent settled on Plains. Haha, I get 15% bonus in your land for existing. It's insane. Finally, and just to put in perspective how good that is, Discipline just got removed because it was too strong at 10%. This is 15. Plains is also the most common tile in the map. You can kind of see where I'm going with this and why it's so ridiculous. Finally, Sioux is a civ where it scales really well, but it scales because of the next thing I'm going to talk about. Its early game is going to be fast. Plains has a tendency to spawn more forests. It has a tendency to have generally more flat land, which allows for settlers to move faster, which allows for workers to move faster, which allows for your scouting to be better. On average, your start is going to be a little bit faster, especially compared to the people in jungle and whatnot, or grassland. So because of that, you can actually use an early unique unit advantage. In this case, it's a Buffalo Hunter, which on paper doesn't seem that crazy, right? It's only 1 range strength higher and 1 melee strength higher, so it's a bit tankier, hits a little bit harder than normal combo. What I love about this unit is that it's Sioux's unit. It's not anyone's unit, right? If this unit on Belgium, it'd be good, but it wouldn't be great. This unit on Sioux is perfect. It lets them scale really well because after killing someone with combos, You just use these instead of workers because they can build TPs. So it synergizes extremely well. It feels like a lot of units in Lek kind of feel like they don't have a purpose or they lack an identity. Buffalo Hunter does not lack an identity. Everything is very synergistic. Everything flows very nicely. The main reason we're going to be talking about Sioux, and the main reason the Civ is so crazy, if the Plains bonus is great, don't get me wrong, but the main reason it is a top Civ is because of the TP. The TP is probably the best unique improvement in the entire game. I've had this argument with multiple people, but I genuinely think it's likely the best. If not there's maybe you can make an argument for some of the other ones, but it's probably like top 2 unique improvements. It just guarantees makes every single tile better and workable. And its most important attribute is that it's not limited by, oh, you can't have this next to another TP like a chateau. No, you can have this next to as many as you want, which makes Sioux very tricky when you're learning the game to settle properly. And that's kind of what I'm going to be discussing today. So for those who don't know, a TP, you get it very early at trapping compared to a lot of the other unique improvements like for Morocco or for France that come at chivalry. This comes at trapping. So very, very early. So available at trapping can only be constructed on flat plains or flatland deer and bison, and must be adjacent to a luxury resource. So kind of restrictive in the fact that it has to be plains, or it has to be a deer or bison tile, flatland, and it must be adjacent to a lux. Okay, most unique improvements have adjacencies to luxes. The only one I can really there's a couple actually that can't, like Mont Bailey and the Brazil one, but for the most part, most unique improvements need to be adjacent to luxes, so that's not weird. But what does it do? It provides 1 food and 1 faith, just outright. That's so good because that's before any additional texts are received. So instantly, that's just such a good, such a good bonus to have. Okay, what else does it get? If it's adjacent to a city, this is important, gain 1 culture and 1 gold if it's adjacent to a river. Okay? Also very important. We'll get to that later. The key thing about Sioux that makes them so insane is that all your TPs will gain 1 food at civil. All of them will gain 1 food at civil, which is just incredible, right? It makes tiles that normally you wouldn't want to work, right? Because that's maybe not next to a river and you don't want to put a farm on it because it's going to be a 2-1. Well, that becomes a 3-1. Not to mention it also provides faith. Oh, and by the way, all of your TPs will give you 1 extra faith at theology, right? Crazy. Also, tell me this guy's headdress doesn't look sick. Like, what? Sitting Bull's dope. Anyway, it's very common in Sioux games, if you're playing like a wide Sioux and you maybe like kill a player or something, to have around 400 plus food by turn 80. That is not uncommon, right? And very few civs can consistently hit those numbers, so that's what makes Sioux special. Let's talk about how you settle it and kind of what you should be going for and thinking. So I just randomly, this is quite literally the first game I generated. The only restriction I had in my head is I want to make sure I get plains. Other than that, I will show them anything. Let's talk about this start. Okay, very, very strong Sioux start. You see, first of all, we hit the one thing we needed, which is plains. Important, Sioux settles very differently. On luck cities are not a little bit better. They're 10 times better than on any other civ in the game. Sioux has the best on luck cities, hands down. Okay? Why? Remember the way that we said TPs are generated? It's all about maximizing the amount of tiles that could be made into TPs. So first of all, luxes can't be made into TPs, but almost every other adjacent tile to our luxes can likely be in a TP. So if I settle here, right? If I settle here, let's think about how many tiles can be. So we have these 3 tiles that can instantly become TPs, right? So all 3 of these are going to be TPs. Then if I settle on here, all of these can be TPs, right? And this one as well. Then if I settle, if I settle on this ivory, 1, 2, 3, 3 more TPs. On this lapis, for instance, that's another 2 TPs. The point I'm trying to make here is that it's very easy. And this isn't even like that great of Sioux land. Like there's a lot of grassland and stuff. It's mostly just like our immediate area that's plains. But if we just like look around, right? Like what could be Sioux? Good Sioux land, right? Like, okay, settling here, that's another 2 TPs. Settling here, that's 3 TPs. Just keep going down. Like here could be another 2. Here could be 1, right? Like this salt tile could be 3. It's very common in some cases, like depending on how good your Sioux land. Like I've had games where every single one of my cities is as Sioux are on Luxes, and all of my adjacent tiles can be made into TPs. Any other Civ in the game would hate this city, pretty much, right? But for Sioux, this is 4 TPs. So on wine is you don't even care about having the hills in your borders because you have culture on these TPs because they're adjacent to your cap, or they're adjacent to your city. So you're able to work a ton of extra culture, right? And you'll just grow to the hills. Sioux gets so many bonuses for settling on TPs that it incentivizes a wide type play. I've played multiple games of Sioux as tradition. It feels very good. The problem with tradition is you're just on less cities. So my favorite way to play Sioux is on Liberty or on Honor. You want to maximize the amount of cities you can have. Why? Because you want to maximize the amount of TPs you have. This is kind of how, like, when you're playing Sioux, you're not playing Sioux, you're playing TP Simulator. The whole point of the game is just to maximize your TPs because it's the highest value tile in the game. So having as many as you possibly can is just net positive. The other thing I think that's important to mention when we're considering Sioux is just how much faith you can get, right? If I settle on this city, that's 3 TPs here. If I settle here, that's 4 more. Let's say I only settled those 2, right? How many more TPs can I get? Well, that's 1, right? This is plains, right? I think that's plains. Does it tell me? Yeah, that's plains, and that's adjacent to, so that's another one. All of these could be TPs. These 3 could be TPs. So that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 5, 6, 7 in that city. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 in that city. So that's 12. So we have 12 TPs in 2 cities that are min distance from each other. Okay? That's 12 TPs. That doesn't seem like that much. But when you think about it, that's 24 faith per turn. After theology, that's 24 faith per turn. In my opinion, and this is a hot take, but that's what this channel is about. Fuck all y'all, I don't care. In my opinion, piety is dumb to do on. Like, it doesn't make sense for my little head to go piety unless you have no planes. Maybe because then you're just playing a vanilla Civ. But if you have planes, there is no reason to go piety. Your faith is going to be ridiculous, right? I've seen some of my favorite builds for Sioux is just Liberty straight into Patronage to support your insane growth, right? And then you take like synagogues because you're going to have so much faith, right? It's like one of the only Liberty Civs that can really afford to take and not go piety second and can still take a building because they'll be able to use it so well, right? Additionally, you could go honor, right? I think the problem with Liberty and Patro is that you don't have a faith sync after the building, but who gives a fuck? Like actually, who cares? It doesn't matter. All that matters is that your early game is going to be disgusting. You're going to have so much happy. You're going to make so much money because of all the TPs. You're going to have so much food, right? This is kind of how you have to be thinking about this Civ. Almost every single city on the map, like literally almost every single city, like even if I go into the jungle, right? Like let's say I settle here. Okay, well, this is still a TP. So even the worst case scenario for Sioux, you're likely still going to have as TP somewhere, right? Like right here, that's a TP. I mean, that's the only one, but the point I'm trying to make is like even in land that's typically not very ideal for Sioux, like there's going to be a bunch of TPs. Like here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. So like you kind of get my point. Like the amount of TPs you can get is kind of ridiculous, which makes the unique improvement so much better. And not to mention, it's also just really, really strong. All of this kind of put together kind of makes Sioux just so much stronger than other civs. And like I said, like, you know, you want to kind of be focusing on liberty, in my opinion, liberty or honor. Honor for just the early tempo and potential to kill people, but also just because it's typically a wider tree. So my preferred way to play Sioux is Liberty Patro. I like taking synagogues. If not synagogues, I'll do pagodas or something like that. But having some sort of way to spend my faith is important to me, especially when I'm that wide. Following that, you can kind of do whatever you want. You don't have to go Patro. You could do anything. Sioux is one of the most versatile civs in the game. But the most important thing I want you to take away from this video is when you're settling as Sioux, you have to really be thinking about how you're going to settle. Sioux settles very differently compared to any other civ. I think most civs would not make this move. But as Sioux, I'd argue it's probably objectively correct. It hurts your initial growth a little bit, but you know, if you're fortunate in meeting some city states or whatever, you can kind of buy your way into the iron tile, get this deer up, right? You'll have this hill. It's not that bad, but once you scale, it's just amazing. It's just perfect. Now, alternatively, you could just stay here, and that's fine too. You could just stay in spot. But I think maximizing the amount of TPs you have is really good. The other point that's really important is you always want to move from your starting spot if you're standing on a TP. So if you moving clears up a TP, that's always good. In this case, it doesn't, so that's kind of why it's not the best example, but my point still stands. Yeah, so that's kind of all I had for this video. I wanted to keep it kind of short, and look at this, we're already at 16 minutes or 17 minutes, whatever the fuck. These numbers don't lie, guys. Like, these numbers don't lie. Sioux is an incredibly strong civ, but the way you play them is very, very different compared to other civs. You have to have Sioux brain, and it's something you have to kind of adjust to. But once you kind of figure it out, it's going to take a couple reps. But once you figure it out, it is so incredibly strong. So that's all I have for this video. I'll try to be making videos more. My life was in flux. I'll have like a community post about that. But yeah, so hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. Until next time.